Welcome to the 3rd Gen Workshop, everyone. If you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. In today's video, in the 1982 to 1992 Chevy Camaro series, we are installing a UMI F-body, tunnel-mounted torque arm, and new transmission mount. This kit allows you to move the torque arm off the tail of the transmission bell housing and relocate it to the transmission mount. This takes the stress off the transmission housing and moves the load to the subframe of the car. Let's get started. We're working on a 1992 Chevy Camaro Z28 25th Anniversary Edition. This particular Camaro currently has a 305 2-port injection motor and a 700 R4 transmission. We are installing a UMI torque arm and transmission mount with torque arm relocation. Camaro up on the lift, get it secured, and then we'll get started with the factory torque arm removal. Okay, you can see we're on the subframe on all 4 corners, which is exactly what we need because we're going to have to bring in a stand to hold the transmission when we take the transmission mount out. And we have plenty of clearance as we're working on removing the torque arm. So let's put the stand in place and the light in place. Whenever you're working on a 2-post lift, especially when you're working on the back side of a car, or even the front side for that matter, it's always good to put one of these jack stands in place on the subframe just for some extra support as you're jerking on everything, so it prevents it from falling. The first thing we're going to do is remove the torque arm and get that out of the way. And then the next thing we're going to do is remove the transmission mount. When we remove the transmission mount, we're going to loosen these bolts so we're not jerking on the car, and then we're going to move the jack stand back here to hold the transmission in place while we put the new mount in. Okay, these bolts are 21 millimeters. Put that on one end so you can get to it. Then use a 21 millimeter on your impact gun. Now we're not going to reuse these bolts or screws, so we're just going to get a hammer. We're going to punch these out. All right, then we're going to get that same sludge, and we're just going to tap this off. And then for the torque arm, it's just in a rubber mount. Just give it a little bit of a pull. Almost out. There we go. All right, we're going to loosen these bolts, and then we're going to move our stand to hold the transmission in place. So we're just going to loosen them to start. 15 millimeter. So we're going to have to remove the old torque arm mount to put this one in. You know what? I'm just going to buy a new bolt. And I'm going to cut this one off, because I'm never going to use it again. I'm going to buy one long enough to go through to secure the exhaust mount and be done. We cut off the bolt for the transmission, for the torque arm mount that was on the end of the transmission. Now, none of the local automotive stores had
the M10 1.5 120 millimeter bolt in stock. So I went and got some stainless steel bolts, grade 8 from Lowe's. These are 3/8. 3/8 and M10 are really close. These are 120 or 110 millimeters. And so you'll just reinstall these in place of the M10s. And we put this back in its the muffler mount back in its place. So we're going to finish tightening this top bolt. We're going to put these two in place, and then the next thing we're going to do is the transmission mount. I'm going to cut the zip tie, put the exhaust mount back in place. The replacement bolts are 9/16 on the nut and the head versus 15 millimeter metric for the M10s. Exhaust mount reattached. Now we're going to move this jack out to here so we can put our cross member in place. Now the cross member comes with 6 new bolts, and if you have the entire kit, you also get these brackets. So the torque arm mounts like this. The torque arm is also adjustable, so we'll have to set the pinion angle once we get everything in. Next up, we'll mount in the first two holes that already tapped on the frame. When you install your new transmission mount, there are 3 slots inside of here where the rubber mount will line up with. For me, it was the dead middle one. Now, the first thing we're going to do is get the original 4 bolt holes lined up and started. The new bolts from UMI are 17 millimeter instead of the 50 millimeters that came off your factory mount. Okay, once your transmission mount is loosely in here, it's secure, we need to reinstall the transmission washer nut in the center. Again, not tight, just loose. Okay, we're going to install the torque arm. I had to raise the rear differential up a little bit because when I took the original torque arm off, it came down slightly at a little bit of an odd angle. So now we're going to install the new torque arm. To get the first hole lined up, let me slide the bolt in. He's going from the top, but once you get the first one in, second one should go in pretty easily. There you go. And we'll just start the nuts. I'm not going to tighten them down just yet. Before we tighten those down, we have to get our brackets installed up here. These go on like this, and we're going to use the top, and it looks like the bottom. The single hole goes towards the top. For clearance purposes, I'm going to use the second hole. That way this nut isn't touching the transmission housing. So we'll use the top and the bottom holes, and then we will set our pinion angle. Before we tighten everything up, we're going to hit the grease fittings here and here. We'll put a couple caps on the Zerk fitting to keep them clean. Okay, the torque arm is to sit parallel with the drive shaft. And I'm using the top or the bottom bolt here. And I think it's about as parallel as it's going to get. Now it's a matter of tightening everything up. These bolts from UMI are 19 millimeter. What we're going to do is we're going to have to raise this up so we can get a wrench on there to tighten it. The front torque arm is and relocation bracket is done. That's secure. We're going to lower it down to tighten that top bolt because the exhaust mount bolts are in the way. So we had to bring it down to get the top one tightened, then raise it up and bring the other side in. So that's tight. Now we're going to torque down the transmission mount bolts, including the center bolt here. Once these are done, we will tighten down these bolts, and then we will set our pinion angle. According to GM, these back bolts should be torqued at 100 foot-pounds. These are supposed to be at 35 foot-pounds along with this, which means it's just barely tight. Now that all the bolts are tightened up, we need to tighten up these two bolts, and then we will have to lower the car. We'll use some of our large jacks because we have to put the suspension under load in order to measure our pinion angle. Now that the bolts securing the torque arm to the torque arm mount are tight, the instructions say 40 to 50 foot-pounds, which is just a really good crank. I mean, you could break out the torque wrench, but they're locking nuts, so they're not going to back out. Now, we have to set the pinion angle, and that's the torque arm in relationship to the drive shaft. In order to do that, the suspension has to be under load. So we're going to get a couple of large floor jacks to put the rear suspension and the front suspension under load. We're going to have them up as high as I can get them so we can get under the car easily. When we adjust this, from the factory, this has come set at 0 degrees. Now this car is stock ride height. stock springs. So it should be set. We shouldn't have to do anything to the pinion angle. And if all is good, then we will lock these nuts down in place, so there won't be any adjustment. Until then, we'll leave them loose so we can see if we have to make any adjustments. We're going to measure the pinion angle from the engine block, from the flywheel, to the back of the housing here. According to UMI, for a 700 R4 transmission, it should be 1 to 2 degrees. For a stock stick, a T5, it should be 1 to 3 degrees. So since everything on this car is stock as far as ride height, we have replaced the control arms, and we do have rubber, or the polyurethane bushings instead of factory rubber bushings. And all that can change your pinion angle. Your pinion angle is important to adjust because if it's out of alignment, it can cause vibration as you're driving from the drive shaft. The inside adjustment bolt is a 1 inch, and then the nuts on the outside are 1 inch and 1/8. As we talked about, we're going to measure our pinion angle from the flywheel. The car's suspension is under load. I have my 6-ton jacks holding it up. And so our pinion angle is -5. So we want our pinion angle in the back to be 2 degrees different, 1 to 2 degrees different. So we're at -5. So we're going to do -3 in the back. In theory, it should already be at -3. So when you measure pinion angle on the rear from the mount, and we are at -2. So we need to come up a little bit because we won't be more than, we want to be 1 to 2. So at the front we're -5, back here we're at -2. So we need to change this pinion so we are at -3. So not a lot of difference. So we're going to loosen this bolt. Everything else is loosened. We're going to adjust this so we get to -3. And we're pretty much there. Now we'll lock all these down. Now we will raise our car back up and be done.
Thank you for watching. If you like these videos, please hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for the next video in our Chevy Camaro series.